RoboCop, 1987, wasn't just another action movie. It was an ultra-violent satire that received an X rating 11 times before theaters would show it.
Every time that I made mistakes culturally, you can see how wrong you can be as a writer-director.
The star couldn't sit down for months because of his costume. The director fought constantly with the studio over censorship, and the ending they released wasn't the ending Paul Verhoeven wanted. These are 16 facts about the film that almost died from its own violence. The script was rejected by virtually every major studio before Orion accepted it. Screenwriters Edward Neumeier and Michael Miner spent 2 years pitching RoboCop to Hollywood studios. Every major studio rejected it repeatedly. Warner Brothers called it too violent and unmarketable. Universal said it was fascist garbage. Paramount dismissed it as cheap exploitation. Disney obviously refused immediately. Studios couldn't understand the satirical tone. They thought it was either serious fascist propaganda or juvenile action trash. Over 40 executives passed before Orion Pictures finally greenlit it with a modest $13 million budget. Orion executive Mike Medavoy was the only studio head who understood the script's satirical intent. He recognized it as social commentary disguised as action film. Without Medavoy's support, RoboCop would never have been made. The 2-year rejection period nearly destroyed Neumeier and Miner's confidence in the project. Paul Verhoeven initially threw the script in the trash. Calling it fascist director Paul Verhoeven's wife found the RoboCop script in their trash can. Verhoeven had read the first pages and dismissed it as fascist American action garbage. He refused to consider directing it. His wife retrieved the script and read it completely. She convinced him to read past the opening. Verhoeven reluctantly finished it and realized his mistake. He recognized the brilliant satire underneath the violent surface. The script's critique of capitalism, media, and corporate culture appealed to his Dutch sensibilities. Verhoeven called the producers immediately to apologize and accept the directing job. He later admitted his initial dismissal was the stupidest mistake of his career. His wife literally saved the film by rescuing the script from garbage. Verhoeven credited her with his entire American career. Peter Weller couldn't sit down for months because the RoboCop suit cut off. Circulation, Peter Weller's RoboCop costume, was rigid fiberglass that prevented sitting. The suit cut off circulation to his legs if he bent at the waist. Weller spent 12-hour shooting days standing completely upright. He couldn't sit between takes or during lunch breaks. Production constructed a special leaning board so Weller could rest at an angle without sitting. Even bathroom breaks required complete suit removal by multiple technicians. The process took 30 minutes minimum. Weller severely limited food and water intake to avoid bathroom needs. He lost significant weight during production from dehydration and reduced eating. Weller developed chronic back problems from standing rigidly for months. He required physical therapy after filming Wrapped. The physical suffering was so severe that Weller initially refused to return for RoboCop 2. Only a massive salary increase convinced him. The film received an X rating 11 times. Before achieving R rating, the MPAA gave RoboCop an X rating on its first submission. Paul Verhoeven made cuts and resubmitted. X rating again. This cycle repeated 11 times. Each submission received another X rating for graphic violence. The MPAA specifically objected to Murphy's death scene and the toxic waste mutant's death. Verhoeven was forced to cut frames incrementally. He removed individual frames rather than entire shots to preserve the violence's impact. The 11th submission finally received an R rating, despite minimal differences from previous versions. Verhoeven believed the MPAA simply got tired of rejecting it. Orion Pictures grew desperate as release dates approached. The ratings battle cost months of delays and hundreds of thousands in resubmission fees. Verhoeven later restored the cut footage for directors' cut releases, showing the originally intended extreme violence. Kurtwood Smith, based Clarence Boddicker on Heinrich Himmler. Kurtwood Smith played villain Clarence Boddicker with chilling banality. He researched Nazi leadership for character inspiration. Smith specifically studied Heinrich Himmler, architect of the Holocaust. Himmler was described by contemporaries as bureaucratic, polite, and unremarkable, despite orchestrating genocide. Smith wanted Boddicker to have similar disturbing ordinariness. The character's casual violence and cheerful demeanor while committing atrocities came directly from Himmler's documented behavior. Smith's glasses and bland appearance reinforced the bureaucratus monster concept. Paul Verhoeven encouraged this approach, believing true evil is banal rather than theatrical. Smith's performance created one of cinema's most unsettling villains, precisely because Boddicker seems so ordinary. The Nazi inspiration was deliberate commentary on corporate evil's bland face. Smith never publicly discussed this research until years later. The ED-209 malfunction scene was originally twice as long and more graphic. The boardroom scene where ED-209 malfunctions and kills an executive was originally twice as long. Paul Verhoeven filmed an extended sequence showing the executive's body being systematically destroyed by ED-209's sustained gunfire. The victim's body exploded with graphic detail over 90 seconds. Test audiences became physically ill watching the extended version. Some people vomited in the theater. Others walked out. Orion executives demanded significant cuts. Verhoeven reluctantly trimmed the sequence to approximately 45 seconds. Even the shortened version was incredibly violent by 1987 standards. The MPAA demanded additional cuts before granting an R rating. Verhoeven later said the full-length version was too much even for me. The deleted footage was so extreme it was never included in any home video release. Nancy Allen performed her own motorcycle stunts, despite having no training. Nancy Allen played Officer Ann Lewis and insisted on performing her own motorcycle stunts. She had never ridden a motorcycle before production. Allen took a weekend crash course in motorcycle operation, then performed dangerous stunts with minimal experience. She crashed multiple times during filming. One accident sent her to the hospital with severe road rash and bruises. Allen hid the injuries from insurance companies, fearing she'd be prohibited from continuing stunts. She completed the motorcycle chase sequences despite pain and injuries. Paul Verhoeven admired her determination, but worried about liability. Allen's stubbornness came from wanting to prove herself as an action performer rather than just the female cop. Her commitment earned crew respect, but nearly ended her career through preventable accidents. She later admitted the risks were foolish. Basil Polidoris's score was rejected and replaced. 4 weeks before release, composer Basil Polidoris created an orchestral score for RoboCop emphasizing the character's humanity. Paul Verhoeven listened to it and rejected everything. He wanted a more militaristic, march-like theme, emphasizing RoboCop as weapon rather than person. Polidoris had only 4 weeks to compose and record a completely new score. He created the iconic RoboCop march theme under intense time pressure. The rushed replacement score uses heavy percussion and brass, creating a militaristic feel. Polidoris later said it was the most stressful month of my career. The rejected humanistic score was never recorded. Only sketches survive. The march theme became one of cinema's most recognizable action scores. Verhoeven's last-minute rejection accidentally created the perfect musical identity. Sometimes creative crises produce superior results through desperate improvisation. If you're enjoying these behind-the-scenes secrets about classic action cinema, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next deep dive. We've got more shocking production disasters coming soon. Now back to Detroit's future of corporate law enforcement. The toxic waste mutant scene used real chemicals that hospitalized the actor. The scene where Emil is covered in toxic waste used actual chemical substances. The effects team created a mixture that included genuine corrosive materials. actor Paul McCrane wore protective layers under the melting flesh prosthetics. However, some chemicals seeped through during the extended shoot. McCrane developed severe chemical burns on his arms and chest. He was hospitalized for 3 days for burn treatment. The production insurance company investigated and found the effects team had used dangerous substances without proper safety protocols. Filming was halted for safety violations. Effects supervisor Rob Botton was reprimanded severely. The remaining toxic waste effects were completed using safer materials. Miguel Ferrer improvised the "I had a guaranteed military sale" line. Miguel Ferrer played OCP executive Bob Morton. His character's cocaine-fueled arrogance was largely improvised. The famous line, "I had a guaranteed military sale with ED 209, renovation program. Spare parts for 25 years. Who cares if it worked or not?" was completely unscripted. Ferrer created it during the take. Paul Verhoeven loved the cynical honesty and kept it. The line perfectly captured the film's critique of military-industrial complex corruption. Ferrer improvised much of Morton's dialogue throughout production. His natural arrogance and privilege informed the character. Verhoeven gave him freedom to explore corporate evil's casual amorality. The media break commercials were written to be intentionally disturbing. The fake commercials interrupting the film were deliberately designed to unsettle audiences. Writer Edward Neumeier created commercials for nuclear war board games and artificial hearts as satire of American consumerism. The Nukem commercial showing family fun with nuclear war appalled test audiences. Some viewers didn't understand they were satirical. The artificial heart commercial's cheerful tone about product recalls disturbed people. Orion executives wanted to cut the commercials completely. Verhoeven fought to keep them, arguing they were essential to the satire. The commercials created intentional tonal dissonance. They prevented audiences from settling into comfortable action movie viewing. Ronnie Cox was hired because he looked trustworthy and non-threatening. Ronnie Cox played villain Dick Jones specifically because of his wholesome appearance. Paul Verhoeven wanted the primary antagonist to look like a friendly grandfather, rather than obviously evil. Cox had played benevolent authority figures in previous films. Audiences trusted his face. Verhoeven exploited that trust by casting Cox as corrupt corporate villain. The casting subverted audience expectations deliberately. Cox's friendly demeanor while ordering murders created cognitive dissonance. Verhoeven believed American corporate evil hides behind respectable appearances. Cox's performance embodied that concept perfectly. He played Jones with calm professionalism while committing atrocities. Detroit officials were furious about the film's depiction of their city. Detroit city officials condemned RoboCop for depicting their city as crime-ridden dystopia. The film was actually shot in Dallas, Texas, not Detroit. However, it explicitly identifies Detroit as the setting. Detroit's mayor publicly criticized the film before its release. City officials believed it would damage Detroit's reputation and discourage business investment. They demanded Orion Pictures change the location or remove Detroit references. Orion refused. The controversy generated substantial publicity that helped box office. Ironically, Detroit's crime rates in 1987 actually exceeded the film's depiction. The city was experiencing economic collapse and rising violence. RoboCop's dystopian vision wasn't exaggeration, but uncomfortable truth. Peter Weller required mime training to move. Convincingly in the suit, Peter Weller hired professional mime Moni Yakim to teach him movement techniques for the RoboCop suit. The rigid costume prevented natural human movement. Weller needed to create a new physical vocabulary for the character. He studied robotics and mechanical engineering. Weller watched industrial robot arm movements and mimicked their precise, economical motions. The training took 3 months before filming began. Weller's distinctive walk came from mime techniques combined with the suit's physical restrictions. His head turns were calculated and precise rather than natural. Every movement was choreographed and rehearsed. The mechanical performance required intense concentration and physical control. The film's box office success surprised Orion, who expected it to fail. Orion Pictures had minimal faith in RoboCop's commercial prospects. They gave it a modest $13 million budget and limited marketing. The studio expected a small cult audience at best. Orion scheduled it for summer 1987 against major blockbusters. They assumed it would disappear quickly. RoboCop opened July 17th and grossed $8 million its opening weekend. The strong performance shocked Orion executives. The film ultimately grossed $53 million domestically, over 4 times its budget. International sales pushed total revenue past $100 million. Orion hadn't prepared for success. Alternate ending Paul Verhoeven filmed an alternate ending showing Murphy fully regaining his humanity and removing his helmet permanently. The deleted sequence featured Murphy visiting his wife and son, revealing his identity to them. His family accepts him despite his transformation. The emotional reunion provided closure to Murphy's personal story. Test audiences preferred this hopeful ending. However, Verhoeven fought to use the ambiguous ending where Murphy simply says Murphy when asked his name. Verhoeven believed the hopeful ending was too sentimental and betrayed the film's darker themes. He wanted audiences to question whether Murphy truly regained humanity or simply accessed programmed memories. Orion supported Verhoeven's choice. RoboCop could have been a simple action movie with a hero who gets revenge and lives happily ever after. Instead, Paul Verhoeven created an ultra-violent satire that got an X rating 11 times and asked disturbing questions about humanity, capitalism, and violence. The sentimental ending was cut. The suit tortured its actor, and satire disguised itself as entertainment perfectly.